Welcome to our deep dive into Alexander-Dugin's The Fourth Political Theory, published in 2012.
Yeah.
This book
Yeah.
really delves into some
It does.
complex philosophical arguments about the future of political thought.
Absolutely.
We're going to be unpacking Dugin's core ideas,
Yeah.
drawing directly from his text.
It's a dense book.
It is. It is. So
Important.
very much so.
Yeah.
So to start off,
Mm-hmm.
I think Dugin's central thesis is that liberalism, communism, and fascism,
Right.
the dominant political ideologies,
Of the modern era.
have run their course.
Yeah. He's essentially arguing that they've reached a point of exhaustion.
Yeah.
You know, despite their influence, they're no longer capable of providing viable solutions to the challenges.
Like the 21st century.
Exactly.
Okay, so he's saying that they've reached their end,
He is.
in a sense.
Yeah. And what's particularly striking is how he views liberalism.
Okay.
Because he argues that its global dominance, rather than signifying its triumph, actually points to its demise.
Interesting.
And he even states
Okay.
the triumph of liberalism coincided with its end.
So for Dugin,
Yeah,
the very pervasiveness of liberal ideas,
right.
the fact that concepts like individual rights and free markets have become so widespread is a sign of their decline.
It is a sign of their decline.
Almost as if they've become the water we swim in,
Yes,
and we no longer even notice them as distinct concepts.
that's a great way to put it.
Okay.
He connects this end of ideology to trends we see unfolding around us: globalization, the rise of postmodern thought, the shift towards a post-industrial society.
Right.
These are all, in his view, symptoms of liberalism's exhaustion.
Okay, so these are all symptoms of the end
of
ideology.
The end of ideology, as he calls it.
Mm-hmm.
And this leads him to raise this question about the historical subject,
Right.
which he sees as central to each of these three major political theories.
He observes that each ideology had its own distinct historical subject.
Exactly.
The individual for liberalism, the working class for communism,
Right.
and the nation or race for fascism.
Yes.
With the end of ideology, as he calls it.
Yeah.
The question becomes, what could the subject of a potential fourth political theory be?
It's the big question. And this is where Dugin really challenges us to think outside the box.
He does.
He floats some intriguing hypotheses.
Such as?
He considers the possibility of a compound subject,
Okay.
a subjectless history, or even a return to more traditional actors like religious organizations.
Okay.
He even brings up Deleuze and Guattari's concept of the rhizome,
Right.
a decentralized, non-hierarchical network.
So it seems like he's deliberately pushing the boundaries here
He is
of conventional political thought.
forcing us to consider possibilities that might seem radical or even absurd at first glance.
And he's not afraid to provoke.
He certainly is not.
Another key theme that Dugin tackles is this notion of monotonic processes,
Yeah.
particularly the idea of linear progress that we often associate with modernity.
Right, like the idea that history moves in a straight line.
Exactly.
Always towards some better future.
And we take for granted this idea of history moving in a straight line
You do.
towards a better future.
That's precisely what Dugin challenges.
Okay.
He argues that these so-called monotonic processes, whether it's population growth, technological advancement, or economic expansion, are not objective realities, but rather ideological constructs.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So he uses a compelling analogy from the anthropologist Gregory Bateson,
Yes, he does.
who argued against these monotonic social processes.
Right.
So Bateson
Yeah.
uses the example of war to illustrate how unchecked growth in one area can lead to disruption. Dugin goes as far to say that monotonic processes exist only in people's minds.
It's a powerful statement.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder that our assumptions about progress and growth
Right.
might be blinding us
You're right.
to the cyclical and often disruptive nature of historical processes.
Absolutely. And this concept is especially relevant in our current era, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I think so.
Yeah.
It challenges us to question whether our faith in progress is justified, or if it's simply another narrative we've inherited from the Enlightenment.
Another grand narrative.
It might not hold true in the 21st century.
Exactly.
Moving on, Dugin also delves into the concept of gender.
He does.
Analyzing it within the framework of his fourth political theory.
Yes, and he starts by highlighting the dominance of what he calls the patriarchal archetype in modernity. The figure of the rational, adult, well-to-do, white male. This archetype, according to Dugin, has shaped our understanding of power, authority, and rationality itself.
And then he turns this archetype on its head.
He does.
Suggesting that the fourth political theory might embrace figures and concepts that challenge this dominant paradigm.
He's looking for what challenges that, what disrupts it.
And he specifically mentions the non-adult, the non-white, the mad, and even the sex of angels.
All figures or concepts that disrupt the norms of modernity and its understanding of gender.
So it's clear that he's signaling a radical departure.
Absolutely.
From the gender paradigms of the three previous political theories we've discussed.
Yeah, he seems to be asking us to rethink the very categories we use to understand gender and power.
So let's turn our attention to another key aspect of Dugin's work. His analysis of conservatism. He offers a typology.
He does.
That includes fundamental conservatism, conservative status quo, and perhaps most intriguingly, conservative revolution.
Yeah, that's the one that he seems to be.
Yeah, he seems particularly interested.
Most interested
in this idea of conservative revolution.
And he sees it as a potential force for change.
Not just a defense of tradition.
Exactly.
Conservative revolution critiques modernity as a process of degeneration. And argues that even traditional societies contain seeds of decay.
They do.
It's not simply about preserving the past. But about revitalizing what is seen as authentic and valuable in tradition.
Exactly. And that leads him to this rather unsettling analysis of figures like Osama bin Laden, who, despite being a radical Islamist, is seen by Dugin as embodying this concept of conservative revolution.
So Dugin views bin Laden as a sinister warning about the potential return of pre-modernity.
Even in a world dominated by modernization.
Even in our modern world.
He's pointing to the possibility that the rejection of modernity could take on extreme and even violent forms.
It's a sobering reminder.
It is.
That the forces of tradition and modernity are often intertwined.
They are.
In complex and unpredictable ways.
Indeed. Now let's shift our focus to Dugin's exploration of liberalism, which is quite insightful. He sees it as the culmination of Western civilization with its emphasis on freedom from constraints.
But he argues, however, that liberalism's ultimate victory paradoxically leads to a crisis for the individual.
It does. As individuals are increasingly liberated from external constraints, they are left to confront their own inner emptiness and lack of meaning.
So this is where concepts like the post-individual and the transcendentalized private property come into play.
These concepts represent the distortion of liberal ideals, where the pursuit of individual freedom becomes self-destructive, undermining the very foundations of liberal society.
Dugin also delves into the concept of revolution, arguing that it's not simply about replacing one order with another, but about embracing the inherent insufficiency and deficiency.
Yes, what he calls Mangelwesen.
Of human existence.
Of human existence.
He contends that revolution is the only time when one truly becomes oneself. A stark contrast to what he sees as the unauthentic existence of periods between revolutions.
Yeah, where individuals become fixated on their perceived identities.
So this raises an important question.
It does.
For us to consider. How does Dugin propose to translate his fourth political theory into practice?
He acknowledges the challenge of moving beyond the traditional duality of theory and practice, suggesting we need to seek a common root that transcends the limitations of logic and rationality.
And this brings us to his intriguing concept of vertical dementia.
Yes.
So you were describing vertical dementia earlier as a kind of pre-logical heroic madness.
He describes it as a pre-logical heroic form of madness that embraces chaos as a source of renewal.
So he seems to be suggesting that a break from conventional rational ways of thinking is necessary to truly grasp the potential of the fourth political theory. He's advocating for a more intuitive, imaginative, and perhaps even mystical approach to politics and social change. It's a complex and challenging idea.
Very much so.
that speaks to the radical nature of Dugin's project.
Absolutely.
He's not simply proposing incremental reforms or tinkering with existing systems.
He's not.
He's calling for a fundamental reorientation of our understanding of the world and our place in it.
Yeah.
So before we delve further into these implications,
Sure.
let's pause here for now and we'll continue our deep dive into the fourth political theory in our next segment.
Sounds good. So as we continue exploring Dugin's fourth political theory, I think it's worth noting that his analysis of the current global political landscape is particularly thought-provoking.
When you say current, you're referring to the context in which he wrote this book.
Right.
The global economic crisis.
The global economic crisis that was unfolding at the time.
Right.
But Dugin sees this crisis as more than just an economic downturn.
Okay.
He views it as a symptom of a deeper malaise within Western civilization.
Okay.
A consequence of what he sees as the inherent contradictions of liberalism.
So he suggests that the West's likely response to this crisis
Yeah.
will involve doubling down on the very forces that led to it.
Exactly.
A continued reliance on technology and unrestrained market forces.
He's quite critical of what he calls emancipated technology.
Okay.
Drawing on the ideas of Oswald Spengler, Dugin argues that this unchecked technological advancement, driven by the logic of the global market, is exacerbating the nihilistic tendencies he sees as inherent in modernity.
So he's painting a rather bleak picture.
He is.
Of a West spiraling further into crisis.
Yeah.
Unable to break free from its own self-destructive patterns.
That's one interpretation. But importantly, he sees a different path for Russia.
Okay.
He believes Russia must find its own unique path, one that avoids the pitfalls of both liberalism and the Soviet model, which he views as failed attempts to break free from the West's influence.
This brings us back to the core question.
It does.
Of the fourth political theory.
Right.
If the three dominant ideologies of modernity are no longer viable, what comes next?
Yeah, where does he see the potential for a genuine alternative emerging?
Right.
And Dugin doesn't offer a simple blueprint for a new political order.
Right.
Instead, he explores various philosophical and sociological concepts that he believes could inform the development of the fourth political theory.
And one key concept is this idea of the historical subject, which we touched on earlier.
We did.
Dugin emphasizes the need to move beyond the individualistic subject of liberalism.
He argues that the fourth political theory requires a different kind of subject. One that is not solely defined by individual rights and freedoms, but is grounded in a shared sense of belonging and purpose.
He delves into the concept of the ethnos.
He does.
Which he sees as a potential source of identity and meaning.
Right.
In a world increasingly dominated by globalizing forces.
He argues that the ethnos, understood as a group united by shared culture, language, and history, can offer a counterpoint to the homogenizing forces of globalization.
And this emphasis on the ethnos seems to align with his broader critique of monotonic processes.
It does.
And his call for a return to a more cyclical understanding of history.
Precisely. Dugin is advocating for a political theory that recognizes the importance of cultural and historical particularity, one that moves beyond the universalizing tendencies of liberalism and embraces the diversity of human experience.
Now, another key aspect of Dugin's project
Yes.
is his analysis of conservatism.
Okay.
Particularly the concept of conservative revolution.
Right, which we mentioned earlier.
Which you mentioned earlier. Yeah. Dugin argues that genuine conservatism is not simply about preserving the status quo.
He doesn't see it that way.
He sees it as a potentially revolutionary force.
He does.
One that can challenge the destructive tendencies of modernity and offer a path towards a more authentic and meaningful way of life.
Exactly.
He distinguishes between what he calls fundamental conservatism, a form of traditionalism that seeks to return to a pre-modern social order, and conservative revolution, which recognizes that even tradition can become corrupted, and that a radical break with the present is sometimes necessary to restore a more authentic form of conservatism.
This typology of conservatism is particularly relevant to his analysis of the political situation in Russia.
Okay.
He sees the potential for a conservative revolution in Russia, one that could break free from the legacy of both liberalism and Soviet communism and chart a new course for the country.
Interestingly, Dugin also examines the potential role of the left.
He does.
In the development of the fourth political theory. Yeah. He's critical of what he calls old leftists.
Those who cling to outdated Marxist doctrines.
Right.
and fail to recognize the changing realities of the 21st century.
But he sees potential.
He does.
In what he terms left nationalism or national gauchism.
Right. And he argues that this form of leftism
Okay.
can tap into the deep-seated cultural and spiritual values of a nation,
Okay.
offering a more grounded and authentic alternative to the abstract and universalizing tendencies of traditional Marxist thought.
And this idea of left nationalism seems to resonate with his broader emphasis on the ethnos.
It does.
And his critique of liberalism's individualism.
Exactly. Dugin is searching for a political theory that can transcend the limitations of both the left and the right, as they've been traditionally understood.
Right.
One that can integrate elements of both while also incorporating new ideas and perspectives.
Perhaps the most controversial aspect of Dugin's work is his analysis of liberalism and its perceived failures.
And Dugin argues that liberalism, despite its claims to promote freedom and individual rights, ultimately leads to a form of social and spiritual alienation.
So he sees the pursuit of individual freedom as paradoxically leading to the erosion of community, tradition, and meaning in human life.
He's particularly critical of what he sees as the excesses of liberalism, especially in its postmodern forms. He points to phenomena like the rise of consumerism, the decline of traditional moral values, and the increasing dominance of technology as evidence of liberalism's destructive tendencies.
Dugin's critique of liberalism is rooted in his belief that it ultimately fails to address the fundamental questions of human existence, such as the search for meaning, purpose, and belonging.
He argues that liberalism's emphasis on individual rights and freedoms comes at the expense of a deeper understanding of what it means to be human.
This leads to his provocative claim that liberalism's ultimate victory paradoxically leads to a crisis for the individual.
It does. He argues that as individuals are increasingly liberated from external constraints, they are left to confront their own inner emptiness and lack of meaning. This, according to Dugin, gives rise to a sense of alienation and despair that liberalism is ill-equipped to address.
Dugin's analysis of liberalism is certainly challenging.
It is.
And some might find it unsettling.
Absolutely.
But it's important to understand that he's not simply dismissing liberalism outright. He's attempting to engage with it critically.
He is.
And to identify its potential pitfalls.
Exactly. And he's asking us to consider whether liberalism in its current form is truly capable of providing a sustainable and fulfilling foundation for human society. Or if it's leading us down a path of social and spiritual decline.
This critique of liberalism is closely tied to his concept of revolution.
It is.
Which we explored earlier.
We did.
He argues that true revolution is not simply about changing political or economic systems. He sees it as a more fundamental transformation of consciousness, a break from the dominant paradigms of thought that shape our understanding of the world.
So Dugin's call for a fourth political theory can be seen as a call for a revolution in thinking. A radical shift in our understanding of politics, society, and even the very nature of human existence.
He's urging us to move beyond the tired ideologies of the past.
He is.
And to embrace new ways of thinking that can address the unique challenges of the 21st century.
Exactly.
And this brings us back to his concept of vertical dementia.
Right.
Which you described earlier as a kind of pre-logical heroic madness.
Yes, he seems to be suggesting that a break from conventional rational ways of thinking is necessary to truly grasp the potential of the fourth political theory.
So he's advocating
Yeah.
for a more intuitive, imaginative,
Right.
and perhaps even mystical approach
Yes.
to politics and social change.
Mhm.
It's a complex
It is.
and challenging idea
Very much so.
that speaks to the radical nature of Dugin's project.
It does.
He's not simply proposing incremental reforms or tinkering with existing systems.
Right.
He's calling for a fundamental reorientation of our understanding of the world and our place in it.
As we kind of move towards a culmination of our deep dive into the fourth political theory, I think it's crucial to examine Dugin's concept of civilization. It's here that his ideas move from the theoretical into the realm of geopolitics.
So Dugin seems to view civilization as a more significant unit of analysis than the nation state.
Yeah.
Especially in the context of a multipolar world.
Absolutely. He argues that civilizations understood as large-scale cultural and historical entities will play an increasingly important role in the 21st century. He sees them as potential sources of identity and meaning in a world where the nation-state is arguably losing its dominance.
This concept of civilization seems closely aligned with his earlier emphasis on the ethnos and his critique of liberalism's universalizing tendencies.
It is.
He seems to be searching for a way to ground identity and meaning in something deeper than the individual or the nation-state.
Right. He's advocating for a world where different civilizations are recognized and respected for their unique values and ways of life. A counterbalance to the homogenizing forces of globalization and the dominance of Western liberalism.
Dugin's ideas about civilization are particularly relevant to his analysis of the relationship between Russia and the West.
Yeah.
He seems to position Russia as a distinct civilization,
He does.
separate from the West with its own unique cultural and historical trajectory.
Yes, and he argues that Russia must resist attempts by the West to impose its values and models on the rest of the world.
Okay.
This resistance for him is a key element in the formation of a multipolar world.
So when Dugin talks about a multipolar world,
Yeah.
he envisions one where different civilizations coexist and interact on a more equal footing without any single civilization attempting to dominate the others.
That's right. He sees this as a more just and sustainable world order, one that recognizes and respects the diversity of human experience.
Right.
It's a vision that resonates with his earlier critique of monotonic processes, the idea that history doesn't move in a single direction, but rather in cycles of rise and fall of interaction and exchange between different cultures and civilizations.
Dugin's concept of civilization also has implications for how he understands geopolitics and international relations.
He does.
He seems to suggest that traditional geopolitical theories, which focus primarily on the nation-state as the main actor, are no longer adequate for understanding a multipolar world.
He believes that civilizations will become increasingly important.
Okay.
As units of geopolitical analysis and strategy, this shift in focus, he argues, is necessary to make sense of the complex interplay of cultural, economic, and political forces shaping the 21st century.
His geopolitical vision seems to be informed by a sense that the West, particularly the United States, is in decline, and that a new world order is emerging, one in which non-Western powers will play a more prominent role.
He points to the rise of powers like China, India, and Iran as evidence of this shift in the global balance of power. He believes that Russia has a crucial role to play in shaping this new world order, one that is more multipolar and less dominated by the West.
Dugin's geopolitical ideas are certainly ambitious.
They are.
And they have generated considerable debate and controversy, but they offer a unique and thought-provoking perspective on the changing dynamics of global politics, particularly in this era, where cultural and ideological factors are playing an increasingly prominent role in international relations.
His focus on civilization as a key unit of analysis provides a different lens through which to view the complex interplay of forces shaping the 21st century, whether one agrees with his conclusions or not. His work challenges us to think beyond the traditional frameworks of international relations.
As we conclude our deep dive into the fourth political theory, it's clear that Dugin presents us with a complex and challenging exploration of the potential for a new political theory in the 21st century. He doesn't offer easy answers or simple solutions.
Right. Instead, he offers a framework for thinking about the future of politics, one that challenges us to move beyond the limitations of the ideologies that have shaped the modern world. He invites us to grapple with fundamental questions about identity, meaning, and the very nature of political order in a world undergoing profound transformation.
So as we leave you to contemplate the ideas we've explored today, I think the most crucial question raised by Dugin's work is this. What might the emergence of a truly new political theory look like in the years to come? And what role might civilizations rather than nation-states play in shaping the future of global politics?